Hi everyone. This is Jailan. How's everyone's week going? So, um, a couple of weeks ago, I talked to you guys that I'll be trying every week or every couple of weeks to talk to you about one of the cards on the positive discipline toolbox by Jane Nielsen on positive discipline. And today, after a conversation with a friend about um, consequences versus punishment, I decided maybe to talk a little bit about what that is and start with the consequence card. So with my discussion with my friend, I was saying that in the last couple of days, due to being overwhelmed and being with a baby and trying to do pickup with a baby and a toddler at the same time, I've been using sort of threats and punishment with my 3-year-old, telling him, maybe there'll be cartoons, maybe there won't be cartoons when we get home, which honestly hasn't been, that's not positive parenting, but I'm not perfect. And sometimes I'm also impatient and out of resources as well. But I do that knowingly that's not the best thing to do. And we got into this discussion about, well, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? Then how do you get them to behave? Do they just get away with anything that they do? There has to be some sort of punishment or consequence to misbehavior. And that's a discussion and question I get a lot of the times in the workshops when I talk about that. A lot of people think that positive parenting means, not making children feel bad or just letting them do whatever they want. And it's actually not like that. It is discipline. There are rules and there have to be consequences. And the question I get all the time is, so what is the difference between a consequence and punishment? And this is, we have to talk about this a lot, and we talked about this a lot with my friend today, and I gave some examples. So basically, in positive parenting and positive discipline, you can use consequences. You should use consequences because we learn that everything in life has a consequence. If your behavior, good behavior, negative behavior, unwanted behavior, acceptable behavior, everything has a consequence. So that's accepted. But punishments that are threats and so on aren't recommended. So basically, what is the difference and why is that? So there are a couple of different kinds of consequences. A natural consequence is, let's say, you're telling your child to put their jacket on and it's cold outside. Instead of making it a huge argument at the door and insisting and maybe, physically forcing them to put their jacket on or threatening not to go out or take their toys away or whatever, you just let them walk out in the cold to experience actually feeling cold, and then they decide to put their jacket on. I had that last year in the snow. My son hadn't seen snow before, and he wouldn't put his gloves on. And then he just put his hand in the snow, and he wasn't really happy about that. I was right there to support him. I didn't shame him. I didn't blame him. I just said, this is why I wanted you to have your gloves on, because now your hands are really cold and they hurt you. And you bet the rest of the winter he never forgot to put his gloves on again. So that's one kind of consequence. It's the natural consequence. There's another kind which is the one that's, people have difficulty differentiating between that logical consequences and punishment. And logical consequences are something where you intervene as an adult and explain to your child, this is the consequence of your action. This is going to this is going to happen because of what you're doing and how you're behaving. So, say for example, I'll use a couple of examples, but I love this example by the Positive Discipline Association. So, let's say your child is at school and she is writing on her desk. So the teacher could then call her attention to the fact that she's, writing on the desk, which isn't acceptable. She can stop that, or the pen has to be put away. And you might think, well, that sounds like a punishment. Well, in reality, it isn't, because it sort of has what we call the 3 R's and H of a helpful logical consequence, which is that it's respectful, it's relevant, it's reasonable and it's helpful. So it's relevant in the sense that it's directly related to her writing on the desk. It's helpful in the sense that you're giving choices. You're saying, you can stop, or it's going to be taken away the child. You are giving a choice. You're not threatening. Or you're saying you can scribble on something else, or you could be okay with the fact that they're coloring on something, but they have to clean it up in a different situation themselves. So a punishment would be saying, if you don't stop that, you're not going to go on the field trip with the class at the end of the day. That would be a punishment. Something that's humiliating, that's painful, that's not helpful to the situation, that's not related basically to the situation. A few other examples we talked about with my friend today was, let's say when I was taking my son to the supermarket through the winter, we were getting him used to walking to the supermarket and not running away from us in the couple of blocks between our place and the supermarket. So, we talked about it before we went. We talked about what his expected behavior was. We're going to the supermarket now. We're going to walk there. You can walk, or if you you can sit in the stroller. And if you run away, we're going to have to stop, and you're going to have to sit in the stroller, because we can't have you run away, because you could cross the street, you could get too far, you could get hurt, you could fall. Lots of reasons that we explained. And we did that basically, and that's a consequence of their action. A punishment would have been saying, if you run away, when we go to the supermarket, you're not going to get a biscuit or chocolate, which he usually gets when we go to the supermarket once a week, and he gets to pick out what he wants. So that would be the punishment. And I had this conversation with my friend, and she kept asking me, well, what's the difference? It still sounds like a punishment. I really don't see the difference, until I said an example about grown-ups. So let's say, this is the example I said to my friend. I said, let's say we're friends, right? And every time we meet up, I'm always like 30 minutes, 45 minutes late, which I know is insane for most viewers, most of you guys watching. But let's say where I come from in Egypt, that's someone who's on time almost. But I'm never late. So anyway, what if I was late, every time we meet, 30, 45 minutes late? You'd get really sick and tired of that. And you'd be like, Jailan, next time you're late, I'm not going to wait for you more than 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm going to leave. That's a directly related consequence of my behavior. Versus, if my friend says, I'm really sick of you being late all the time, so I'm not going with you to the lunch we had planned next week at all. Or I'm not going to the concert with you that we have planned next week, or something completely unrelated. So that's basically the difference. I think as a grown-up, you can really sense the difference between a consequence and a punishment. What I've been doing with my son, the last couple of days, to be honest, has been, picking him up from daycare, and he's a bit overexcited because it's his new kindergarten. And I'm saying things like, you better sit in the stroller, because he wants to walk, and I can't really, handle him walking and handle baby in the carrier or baby in the stroller at the same time. Still getting used to that. And then I would say, if you don't listen to me, I just wanted to listen. If you don't listen to me, there's no cartoons when we get home, and that's not really right. It just creates this relationship where your child is behaving, not because they're thinking about what's acceptable, what's right for everyone, what's respectful for everyone in this situation. They're thinking, oh no, I just want to do this so I don't get deprived. And even though I think this is one of the few times I've ever used this with my 3-year-old, I could immediately see it, because it was like a whole afternoon of that. I could immediately see it in him, and he was saying things like, as soon as he did something wrong or unacceptable, he'd come running to me and say, Mom, am I still getting cartoons or not anymore? And that really made me feel that's all he cares about. He doesn't care about, if he's breaking his toy or, something's happening to someone else. All he cares about now is the fact that he's not getting his cartoons. And then, so what the philosophy of positive discipline is based on is asking the question of, today, he's interested in cartoons. the more we focus on dealing with threats, rewards, and punishments, and not a sense of being helpful and raising sort of internal goodness in children, the more, when they get older, the more the bar is raised, the more you have to threaten, the bigger the rewards get and the bigger the punishment gets. I mean, today his world is cartoons. Tomorrow it's going to be, a car or grounding him or whatever. And that's really, we are setting the whole idea of positive parenting in the early years is to set the foundation for a healthy relationship when they're older. And you really don't want sort of a sneaky teenager who thinks they're going to get away with something just because they're not caught. So just, I know it's hard, and it's hard for me too. But think about that. Think about, how you phrase or label your consequences. If it's not related to the behavior, if it's not respectful to yourself and your child as well, if it's not reasonable, within reasonable limits of something that your child can do or you can do, if it's not helpful to the situation, then it's moved into being a punishment, and that's not really, in alignment with positive parenting, and it's not helpful in the long term either. And there's been a lot of research on that. I'm going to attach a couple of links for you guys to read about consequences versus punishment and some things about punishment in the comments underneath this live feed. And I hope you like these sort of weekly or bi-weekly, or whenever I get a chance, the baby sleeping tips. Let me know. And I know there's a big discussion about, so what do you do when your child harms another child? And that's a totally different topic. You have to react a bit more firm in that situation. But I'm talking about general things like, you're out in a restaurant, your child won't sit still, or your child's running around, or maybe throwing something on the floor or whatever, just milder behavior situations. And I'm talking about severe situations where they're harming someone. That's another discussion. So I hope you like it. And let me know if there's anything specific that you'd like me to cover or talk about, or if you have any comments with these sort of little live tips. I hope you have a nice day. It's nice and sunny, and a nice weekend. Bye.